Welcome to the fourth video of 16 Squared, a fun tangling project by Tangulations, and we're on our last line of background tangles. So let's get started. So the last little row to fill in our reference sheet that you can use for tangling, I just want to use one that's really quite good for writing, but sometimes if you want a sort of lineal look, this is a really useful one to use. And it's a really simple one called laced. It just involves drawing your line that you want to put through a particular area of a background. Perhaps it's a bit like the other one where I talked about beadlines, where you're joining one area to another. And so we literally do two short lines, your C shape on either end, and then add a little bit of drama in those background pieces there. So it looks like you've got holes and your shoelace is disappearing through the paper of your tile. Really simple one to do, great fun for drawing. I often will use this for cards, etc., as a way of drawing a line, doing laced. Of course, you don't have to stick to lines, so if you want to do a more organic shape with laced, you can have a fair bit of fun with it as you proceed to do it almost like a dot. So here we go. Who said the impossible isn't possible? And you can have a little bit of fun with doing some decoration within as well. So it doesn't have to be in line, but it's a lovely wee tangle called laced. Now this one I sort of popped in. Occasionally you find just the right time to do it. It's one called wavy, and it works very simply by just having a few sort of wiggly lines that just fill up a space. So it's quite a light one, but you can have a little bit of fun with it as you sort of wiggle your space, your area that you want to fill. And then the next part just involves deliberately popping an orb in between the mid space between all of your lines. So you find sometimes it's a little bit wider, and that's okay. Just keep your orbs in the mid space between the two lines as you're going along. And you can choose to fill it with quite small orbs, or you can go a little bit bigger if you like. And this one you can use also a little bit of a use of drama to change the direction of the look, because it's taking me a little bit longer to fill in my orbs here. Just making sure that I'm getting exactly between those two lines. So you can go from having sort of all blank to doing a little bit of fill on alternating dots. I love the process of following alternating dots. It's always this lovely do one, miss one, do one, miss one. Or if you want it to look a little bit more dramatic, you can fill every single dot, or of course you can change it and make the next one all not filled orbs, and you can add an extra little bit of weighting if you want by adding a second wavy line with a bit of sparkle. And have a lot of fun with that one, and it's quite useful for filling up a slightly bigger space. Now I talked earlier about floating tangles. We did it on video 2 there with tipple and pretense. Just want to do a little bit of thinking about floating, but with a background tangle that you probably all use occasionally when you want a little bit of a firework look. The lovely tangle. So once you've got your little tangle of there's no better way of seeing that. You can actually float some extra elements out. So you can really create a bit of a blossom look with and have some of these elements of it floating out. A little bit thinking about those two from video 3, Apicore and Blossom, just using an element of. You can of course earth it as well. So another one that I might often use, a bit like my cousins together again, is I might use the lovely wee tangle Jeremy. So this involves a solid, well actually they're all a bit different, solid orb and then an aura, and then I'll use that aura to sort of bounce my lines off and create spiky outer edge to it. So he can be great fun, just slowly following around with my little spikes. However, you may want to change the spike, and this is where it can be a little bit of a cousin of and that is by having my orb center, but then using an element of to come off my little germy orb and build it slowly around the space. You can have little wiggly lines if you don't want to be completely straight. You can change the angle, but you can see how a mixture of the two, just using a common element, can be done to make those two sort of sit together. So and germy. Good fun, germy. And then the last little box that I've got here to fill, goodness me, how did we get there so quickly? Just want to refer to a couple of techniques. One of them is to use something that trails around, a little bit like the bead lines, and often I will pop in this one into a background, pen drills. So this is a lovely one which has a stem and then a beautifully created knot, and then you can produce two stems off your knot if you like, and slowly build this tangle going in a direction that you want to head. You don't have to do two stems, but you can trail it up to look like one if you like, or branch off with two. My history in woven design, I kind of often like the ones that look like a piece of yarn. I've just done my little weaver's knot as I've gone along. And of course this one is really easy to give a direction to, and so often I might use it almost as a frame and do a little tangle within. So it's definitely can be used in a background though to fill a bit of space, or can be used when you almost do the foreground as the background. And then the last little space I've got here, tiny bit left, I'd like to do one called Morning Glories. Now this one is a little bit like good old Fisku, but this one has a little bit more detail to it, in that I'll do a triangle shape. I'll pop that triangle shape on a stem, and then I'll do some little side triangles. So I'll go from just short of the triangle point, and I'll just give it a couple of little side triangles as I come off, and I can come down the stem. So this is another one that can just sort of grow out, so you can choose where it's going to head, and then slowly build these wee morning glories off the edge of existing stems, or you can branch out into an area to fill a background. So sometimes when you just don't want to use Fisku again, using another little organic one of these little flowers can be really helpful. And the last little part of this is we can throw it into the background here. It's almost like a climber. So if you think of a lovely sweet pea, if you know that plant, it has little climber stems. Vines, grapevines do the same thing, where they have very lightly a little sort of climbing hook, a little tendril that goes out and tries to hook onto things. And very lightly have a squiggle in it, and you can float these off into space as well. And they can be quite good fun when anchored to a tangle to then float off in the edge. So I hope you've enjoyed the videos. This is all 16 squared as the project goes, as we've gone along, and you've now built your own reference of background tangles. So I hope you've had fun. Hope you've been able to follow along, and I have some more videos on the Thinkific program if you are interested in more paid lessons. Meanwhile, enjoy your own reference. Congratulations. I hope you've managed to build them along as we've gone. Have fun and happy tangling.